Hey guys, Blakey here and welcome back to another video. Today I have another tutorial for you guys and it is going to be on the Photoshop interface. So in this video I'm going to be covering the complete basics of Photoshop. Not really any specific tutorials on how to draw or anything like that. Just so you know your way around all of these tabs and what the most basic of these do. I'm not going to go in depth on all of these, and I'm not going to go over every one. Like for example, I'm not going to be going over the spots healing brush or any of these tools. I can do a separate video on these if you guys need it. Same for the clone stamp tool. I find that when you're very starting out on Photoshop, you don't really touch these tools. Same with these ones. But the rest of these you'll tend to use quite a lot. And also just a few keyboard shortcuts that you're going to find pretty helpful and ones that you're going to need to use quite a lot. So the first thing you're going to do when you get Photoshop, you're going to come up with a blank page. So the first thing you're going to want to do is press File, New, and you're going to get given this window. Now the first thing, you can change the name to whatever you want. Set your preset to custom so you can do all of your own things. So what I tend to do, I keep resolution at 72. The resolution depends on the size of your image. But what you want to do for width and height, this tab here, these two tabs, make sure that at pixels, because most things that most images that you're working with, you'll be told the dimensions in pixels. So it's better to have them in pixels on Photoshop, so you know you're on the same dimensions. So because you could accidentally put 800 centimeters for both, and then it wouldn't be 800 pixels if you're importing it to Unity or importing it into a website or something like that. So we're just going to go and start off with an 800 width by 800 height. The resolution is 72, and a key thing with making this, let me put this back to 72, background content, make sure you pretty much are always going to set it to transparent, unless you're illustrating, which in that case a lot of people will use Adobe Illustrator, which I can do a tutorial for you guys if you need. But anyway, enough of me talking my head off. Let's go ahead and press OK, and you're going to be given a blank page. So it might look a little bit overwhelming having all these tools and all of these tabs. I know it was the same for me when I first started using Photoshop quite a few years ago. So I'm going to be showing you what the majority of these do, and the ones that you're going to use a lot and the ones that you don't really tend to worry about. So the first thing I'm going to do, we're going to go to File. So obviously you've got your New, your Open. They're pretty self-explanatory. You won't tend to use these two. I haven't even used these once myself. Same with any of these. They're pretty much all self-explanatory. If you want to save your image, you'll press Save As, and then you can change. You can pretty much change it to PNG, Photoshop, anything like that. So if we back out of that, is there anything else that we really need to know here? Not really. So the next one that you will tend to use a little bit, but most people use shortcuts for this, is the Edit to. So if you want to undo or step forward, step backwards, you're going to use your Control Z and your Control Shift Z. All of that stuff kind of thing. Apart from that, you're not really going to tend to use these because most of the edit tools are pretty much on your little side here. We're going to go to image next. So image, you might tend to use a while. So if we go to image mode, if your image happens to be in grey and you can't change it, chances are it's on grayscale. I know Photoshop do tend to do this every now and then. It can be a shortcut that people accidentally press and stuff like that, but make sure it's usually pretty much always set to RGB color. Moving on, adjustments. I don't tend to mess with this because you can do pretty much all of this in other tabs, which we will get onto a little bit later. If you want to change the size of your image after you've already made it, you can go to here and bring this. If you actually click and hold on width or height, you can drag it up and down like that. But we're going to pull out of that for now. Same with canvas size. You can do the same with the actual canvas. We have image rotation. We can flip your whole image in all degrees. We don't tend to do that. Duplicate, we can do that other ways. But apart from that, you're not really going to use any of these other tools. I'm just trying to show you guys the ones that you're going to use the most, because ones that you're not going to use, it's very overwhelming if you think that you're going to need them all. Layer, so you've got a new layer, but again, there's other ways to do pretty much all of these things. If we do come across something where we need to use this, I will tell you guys. But you can pretty much find everything here by right-clicking on a particular layer. Type panels, I don't really tend to use type ever. It's for text, and you can do that once you're actually typing, so I'll show you guys what I mean. Select, so I tend to use this every now and then. So if I'm dragging one image from one thing to another, you'll press select all, which I always press Control A, and you can see it brings this little cut off tool, which you can it's telling me I can't move it at the moment because the area is empty, because we haven't actually drawn anything yet. So I'm going to press Control D to deselect. Apart from that, you can select all layers, deselect all layers. Next, so filter. So I'm going to get into these once we've actually started drawing, but these just give an overall effect to everything in your image. 3D, this is a bit more of advanced. This is if you're working with three-dimensional images and stuff like that. This doesn't tend to be the case for many Photoshop users because they will use other things for 3D modeling and stuff like that. So view. So there is a good amount of key concepts that you're going to need to know, and good keyboard shortcuts. So one key one is fit on screen, which is Control 0. So if I press Control 0, you can see it zooms in very slightly. Now, the next one is the zoom tool. So if I press Control and Alt and your mouse scroll wheel, you're going to zoom in and out. You'll find you will use this an absolute ton, guys. I use this tool so much when I'm on Photoshop. And once you've done it a few times, you don't even need to think about it. Don't even need to look at your keyboard, but you will use it a lot. So try and get in the habit of zooming in and out using Control, Alt, and mouse scroll wheel. Okay, moving on. Is there anything we need to know from view? Not really. Pretty much the rest of it is self-explanatory. Next, so Windows. So this is your Windows tool. So this is basically decides what you want. So the main ones are color, which is over here. We've got adjustments, which is just down here. We've got layers. You're pretty much always going to have layers on. There is a keyboard for keyboard shortcut for this, which is F7, and I'll pull this up. You'll be using this a lot. This is your tiny little interface. This is pretty much all of your separate layers, but we're going to be getting onto that very, very shortly. And this is your help tool. If you do need any extra help, they do have a forum and so forth. So we're going to go on, and so if you want to create a new layer, you've got these little tools at the top, at the bottom even. You won't tend to use pretty much any of these apart from this one. So this one is create a new layer. So if we go ahead and click it, you can see we now have a layer 2. So I can alternate between these two layers. So if I go over and select the brush tool, we can go and draw a big circle here, and then I can switch. You can see the little thumbnail. We have it on layer 1, but not layer 2. Now, if I go to layer 2 and draw a little smiley face, where it looks like one image on here, they're actually two separate layers. So I could go ahead and delete this one, but it won't delete the other one. Or I could go and delete that one, but it won't delete the other one. Now, we're going to go back to something I showed you a little bit earlier, guys. If we go to select at the top and press Control A, or we can press all layers, which is Alt Control A. You can see it selects both layers, and now we can move the whole thing all together as a collective. So that's just a short little tutorial on how to use layers. So now I'm going to move on to these little tools here, and then that will wrap up the absolute basics. I am going to show you the texting tool and a few things that you can do with that also. So obviously this one's pretty self-explanatory. The move tool tells you, if you hold down click, it tells you whereabouts you are in the image in centimeters. We then have the select tool. If you hold down on all of them that have this little corner bit, it means there's more than one tool available. So if you hold down and select, so we've got a rectangular tool right there. If I can press Control D, it will deselect whatever I've got. Same with all the circle and the stuff like that. So depending on what you're working with, what vectors you have. So these top set of tools are pretty much all just for selection. There's not really given any effects. With the lasso tool, you have a little bit more detail on what you're selecting. So if I was to let go here, it will create an automatic line between these two dots. You can see there. So now anything in this I could delete, move around, and so forth. So I'm going to press Control D to get rid of that. Next, we have the polygonal lasso tool, which is very similar to the lasso tool, but it's more for vectors. So if I just click and then click again, click again, click again, click again, I can press Enter, and it will give yet again another pencil. So I'm going to press Control D. We have the same with the magnetic lasso tool. It pretty much does the same thing as a polygonal. You won't tend to use it that very much. Next, we have the magic wand tool and the quick selection tool. So these tools are pretty helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys something. If I draw a big circle like that, I'm going to fill it in like that. Just use this fill tool like that. Fill all of this in. And then I go to this color tool. I'll show you guys what this means in very shortly. And I press red. And I draw a big circle like that. Go and fill this in really quickly. Now, so if we have this magic wand tool, you can see this is all one layer. So I could select all of this and delete it all. If I had, there we go. If I wanted to just get rid of one color and they're distant enough from each other, we can go ahead and go to this magic wand tool and just click on whatever color I want to delete. So if I wanted to delete the black, I'll click on the black, press delete, and it will disappear. Same with the red. If I press Control D, deselect, and click that, I can hit delete and it will go. It's a very, very handy tool. This is very similar to the quick selection, but you get a little bit more accuracy. But with this one, because it's all exactly the same color, it will automatically just select it. But you'll find you'll use the magic selection tool when you have quite a lot of colors to work with. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and select a new layer and delete this current one. So now we have the crop tool. So the crop tool is used if you want to resize your image to a specific part. So if I press that and then I press enter, it resizes the image. But we're not going to do that. That's pretty much all the crop tool is used for. I rarely ever use the crop tool. I'm not going to go into these tools because they can be a little bit confusing to explain. I can do a separate video on this if you guys need. The eyedropper tool, it pretty much will select any color that you have. So you can see we can even go to like any of the interface tools, and it will, if you look in the top right, depending on what color we're on, it will actually change to that exact color. So I don't tend to use the eyedropper in this way. If I want to change the color, if we bring up this color, I can then use the eyedropper tool like that, and it will change it to the color I want. But I'll go to that in a little bit. The spot healing brush, I'm not going to go to this. You don't tend to use this when you're first starting out. You do have a red eye tool, I guess, but pretty much every phone has a red eye tool now, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, this is the big one that you're pretty much going to be using the most. So we have the brush tool and the pencil tool. So there's a few things you need to know. If I draw a big circle like this, you can't really see that without zooming in with the Control Alt zoom. You can see they are individual pixels, so each one is 1 pixel. This is because if we go to the top left and press size, it is set to 1px, which stands for pixel. If I was to change this to 12, you can see it is 12 wide now. So now you can zoom out. If we press Control 0 to fit on the screen, you can see it's a little bit more accurate, and we can see it a little bit better. So you can fit this to support your needs. But I tend to not really use the pencil tool like this because I use Photoshop mainly for pixel art. So I'm using pretty small dimensions on 1 pixel at a time. But if you're going for more designed basis, you're going to be using the brush tool. So the brush tool gives a little bit more flexibility when it comes to your free-flowing art. So you can see it is a little bit more smooth on the corners, and we can change this to fit it even smoother. If we change the hardness from 100 to 0, you can see it's very, very soft on the edges now. There's not pretty much any hardness. It's pretty self-explanatory. We can lift this to 50%. You can see it's a little bit more. So again, you do have a lot of freedom with that. So if we go ahead and delete this. So what do we have next? The color replacement tool and the mixer brush tool. Again, you're not really going to use this unless you're going to look for a more advanced. Very similarly to the clone stamp tool, they're not very necessary for illustrating. Same with the history brush tool, but the rubber tool, you're going to use an absolute hell of amount, and that is an absolute promise. You can probably work that out yourselves. So if we were to go ahead and fill this in, we then press the E tool, it will switch to the rubber, and now you can see it's very, very small, but it does rub out. This is again because in the top left, the size is set to 1 pixel. If I was to change this to 5,000, literally 1 click, and it would delete everything. But if I was to go to, if I switch back, there we go, I can do quite big deletes. So you can mess around with this. It is pretty fun to mess around with, I guess. If we go ahead and delete that layer. So now we have the gradient tool, the paint bucket tool. They're the two that we're going to be focusing on. I didn't miss any out. No, these are, it's very similar to the magic wand tool. It will select all the colors that are the same as that one and delete them all. So if we just go back, because I have major OCD, I need them all to be the top one, the default one. But anyway, so we're going to go to the paint bucket tool. So you can see all I need to do is literally click, and it will fill in that whole image with whatever color we had. I'm going to go ahead and deselect with Control Z. That will be your undo tool. So we can change the color we want to fill in. If I go to red, fill it in, you can see it's very, very vibrant, and that is very strong to the eyes. But again, you can change all of these colors. You pretty much have any color in the world you want here. So I can go to some dull turquoise blue. or we could go to a green and very vibrant and fill that in the same way that if I went to the pencil tool and I brought this up just a little bit so you can see that I've got a nice circle, and then we go to the red tool and we go to the paint bucket tool, fill that in, we've got a green circle with a red fill. So that is pretty much how the paint bucket tool works. You probably know how the paint bucket tool works. Okay, the gradient tool, I find I absolutely love this tool. This is a really fun tool to work with. I tend to use this a lot when I'm on Instagram and I'm making my I'm making my images and stuff, my background. So you can change your gradient. So the way I change my gradient is if you actually double click on this layer, you bring up all your layer styles, and you see if you have gradient overlay, it will actually bring a new gradient. See, I don't tend to press the actual gradient. I'll just use a gradient in here. So if we press gradient here, click on this little color, it's going to switch between. So the two that you're going to care about is these two. So if I go and click on this little dot, press color, and I switch that all the way up, you can see the bottom half changes to red and it blends with the white that we have on the other side. But if I go to this and I change it to a nice blue, for example, you see we get this really smooth purple color, which does tend to look very, very, very nice. So that is the gradient tool. I don't know how we're doing for time. I don't want to make this too long for you guys and make it too overwhelming. I can do this a two-part if we need. But anyway, the blur tool. So the blur tool it's okay. I don't tend to use it that much, but if we have a massive color like that, this is very, very rough, and we've got a massive color like that, the blur tool should kind of link them together, and you can see it's very, very smally, very like tiny. It just blends it a lot, really, and it's nice. I guess you can use it for gradients. I don't tend to use that much, but in the same way, the sharpen tool kind of does the opposite. It's creating a weird effect now because we've just blurred it, and we're not really working with anything that needs sharpening, so it doesn't really know how to react. And then we then have the smudge tool. So this tool is quite fun to work with. I found I was messing around with this quite a lot when I first started Unity. So it kind of mixes and drags any layers you have. It's very satisfying to just kind of mix layers like this, I guess, but not really for me. Kind of gets a little bit repetitive. Anyway, we have the dodge tool, the burn tool, and the smudge tool. So I don't tend to use these tools very much again. So we have the dodge tool. It kind of just enlightens it, burns it a little bit. Same with the burn. This is going to darken it. And then the sponge tool. I don't really know why you would use this tool. I guess if you're working for really detailed illustrations, this is what you'd use. But you can see it just kind of raises the opacity and raises the levels of light. Apart from that, you don't really tend to use it. We've got the pen tool, which you don't really tend to mess with. I can do a separate video on the pen tool because it can be a little bit confusing to understand. You can see we're making some weird ass stuff over here. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and back out of that. So, see, I don't like using this pen tool. It's very annoying. We then have the text tool. This is the final thing I'm going to cover in this video before I call it a day. If we need to do another video on this, go ahead and tell me in the comments and I can cover any of these in specific detail. So if we go ahead and click the text tool and just press down, press left click, you can see we can start typing. My name is Blakey. And you can see I have a custom font installed when I'm developing games. So yours will not usually look like this, but you can change the font, which is pretty much going to be the first thing you do. So if you actually, I spelt it wrong. That is ridiculous. There we go. Hi, my name is Blakey. So if we go ahead and press Control A, it will select everything. We can then change the color. If we go ahead and drag down, we can, if we press Control T, oh no, that is a lie. If we press tick and then press Control T, we have this little thing. This goes for all images. If you press Control T, it's going to resize your image. We can hold Shift to keep its proportions, but if we let go of Shift, you can see it will not keep its proportions. So we're going to go ahead and back out of that. Press Control T, Shift, and resize it up just like that. Hi, my name is Blakey. We can go ahead and change the font. If we go up to here and press Select, so you can actually type in the font. So if you wanted Impact, I can type in Impact, Select, and we then have that font. We can, so there's quite a few things we can do with text actually. If we go ahead and select everything, we can resize it using this also, which is pretty handy, I guess. We do have some warp tools which we can use, so we can arc it. We can do a lower arc, we can do the flag, if we actually select it. There we go. So yeah, there's quite a few things. We can also go ahead, if you don't have this window, we can go ahead and look at, I'm not even 100% sure what this one's called, but if we just back out of this. So here we have all these text tools. So we can change metrics. So you can just very, very slightly change it. You won't tend to use too many of these in detail. But we do have some italics. We've got all capital letters, all a little bit smaller, all to the power of. So yeah, there's quite a few different things we can mess around. Put a line in it if you really want to. I don't tend to use this very often myself. So there, yeah, that is pretty much the basics for Photoshop, guys. If you need any other tips or tutorials on this, go ahead and let me know in the comments and I'm happy to cover them. I'll thank you very much for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.